morning. Welcome to the special meeting of the Glendale City Council on May 4th, call to order at 9:07 a.m. Due to the evolving situation with the COVID-19 novel coronavirus and health recommendations from the Elko County Health Department, this Glendale special meeting will be available to the public electronically. Due to social distancing requirements, the public will not be able to attend the meeting. The public, you are encouraged to watch and participate from the safety of your homes to practice social distancing. You can view this meeting on Charter Cable Channel 6 and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. It is also streaming online at glendaleca.gov public meeting portal. For public comments and questions during the meeting, call 818-937-8100. City staff will be submitting these questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person during the Glendale City Council special meeting. And with that, Mr. Dimon, may we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Agajanian.
Present.
Brotman.
Here.
Kasakian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
And Mayor Devine.
Here. What's next, please?
The agenda for the Tuesday, May 4th, 2021 special public meeting of the City Council is posted on April 28th, 2021 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. And next?
One would be Finance Fiscal Year 2021-2022 Budget Study Session 2, Measure S.
Thank you. Mr. Galanian?
Yes, good morning, Mayor Devine, members of City Council. Thank you for joining us this morning. Today is the second study session of the budget season when we will cover Measure S funds. The presentation will include the status of the current year's fund as well as the status of the programs and projects that Council had previously allocated funding for. We'll then move to next year's fiscal budget where we have included a list of recommended programs and projects for your consideration based on Council's set priorities. These items are in alignment with the essence of Measure S that the voters approved to protect essential services that we provide, including housing, parks and recreation, infrastructure, as well as a handful of other quality of life measures. At the end, we will open it up for your input on the allocation of these funds and the fund balance. And budget staff will keep a tally on a spreadsheet as you review the recommendation and may see fit to add other items. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Flynn, Director of Finance, for the presentation. And as she goes through her presentation, we will invite respective directors of the departments where we will be, or they will be sharing details of the programs and projects and as well as the recommendations for next year. With that, Ms. Flynn.
Good morning, Mayor Devine, members of council. Thank you, Mr. Galanian. As Mr. Galanian indicated, today we'll be covering Measure S, the current fiscal year update, as well as next year's proposed budget. So going to slide 3, we now have a little history that we can provide to council since Measure S has been in place for a couple of years now, and we have a projected budget for next year. So slide 3 gives you a sales tax comparison between our normal 1% Bradley Burns sales tax that the city receives, as well as what Measure S revenues look like. So on the far left of the chart, you'll see the actuals that we received for fiscal year 18-19, as well as 19-20. And if you recall, Measure S was voted on by the voters in November of 2018, and we first started collecting sales tax from Measure S in April of 2019. So that is why the first year there is only a little over $5 million. And then our projections for fiscal year 2021, as well as next year 21-22, are on the far right of the screen in the chart. And you'll see that we are not changing our projection for this current fiscal year. We do anticipate receiving the amount that we're projecting, and it goes up slightly for next year. On the bottom part is basically the same information in a bar graph form. Moving on to look at the expenditure side for this current fiscal year, these are all programs that council approved during budget adoption last year and made revisions to during the current fiscal year. The first part under the blue category is all the housing programs. These are anything from assistance programs to land acquisition, cash subsidies for land development, for housing development projects that have been approved. What, on the first line is the assistance programs. These are unallocated funds of $3.3 million. These are not assigned to any programs at this time. Council has not assigned these, and staff is recommending that the funds go back into fund balance at the end of the year and not get carried over. The remaining funds, you can see which ones are getting carried over. For example, the housing development for 900 East Broadway, that's $7.7 million. That will get carried over for a cash contribution for that project next year. The $6 million that was set aside for additional land acquisition also being carried over. And then the monthly housing subsidy program, we have some carryover, as well as you'll see soon some new funds. This is one of the first programs that council approved for subsidy for 1,000 renters in the city, low income seniors. I believe it's $300 a month subsidy. And then the rental rights program is fully spent for this year, and homeless services, low-income student rental assistance, as well as low-income family employment and rental assistance, all being carried over. The last one there, the low-income family employment and rental assistance, there is another small amount that will be coming forward as an additional amount in 22-23, which is why you don't see the full carryover amount under this category here. At the bottom of the chart is some infrastructure projects. We have the citywide traffic study, the Verdugo Wash Greenway feasibility study. Both majority of those funds are being carried over, as well as the seismic upgrades on the fire stations. The study has been done on the seismic upgrade for the fire stations, and my understanding is Public Works is putting together the specifications to go out to bid soon for 2 upgrades, or 2 station upgrades. So those should be coming forward soon. On slide 6, we continue with additional programs that council has approved for this year. We have the Parks and Recreation category. Land acquisition is being carried over. The year-round aquatics program is fully spent, as well as the child care support. And then the after-school summer youth sports program is being carried over. That is a project that Community Services and Parks is working in conjunction with the school district on. One of the last categories here under yellow is the economic recovery for commercial businesses in our city. The majority of these funds are projected to be spent by the end of this fiscal year, but we do have some programs that are continuing into next year for a little bit. All of these are COVID related. And then lastly is the COVID vaccination sites of $200,000 that is projected to be fully spent by the end of the fiscal year. So in total, the revised budget for this current fiscal year is a little over $33.8 million, projected year-end actuals of $5.5 million, and proposed carryover of almost $3 million. Slide 7 gives you an ending projection for our fund balance for this current fiscal year. We started the year with $14.2 million. We're projecting our revenues to be $24 million, and the year-end expenditures of $5.5 million. And then we take out the carryovers into next year, and it looks like we will end the year or start next year with about $8.5 million in fund balance.
Can we pause there
Yes.
and see if council has any questions?
Yes. Are there any questions from council?
I have one.
Mr. Broadman?
Yeah, Michelle, could you just explain, and apologies if you were going to do this later, but what the amounts here that could go under the ARPA?
Yes. Mayor Devine, council members, Councilmember Brotman. Let me go back a couple of slides here. So under housing, so if you recall, ARPA, one of the broad categories that the law says we can utilize the funds for is for COVID assistance programs. We still don't have the detailed guidance. I did look yesterday. It's not out yet. But broadly, what we understand that to be is assistance programs related to helping our community bounce back from COVID impact. And that would be, my understanding is in the form of any rental assistance or business assistance programs. So if we look at the housing programs here, the ones that would, I believe, qualify would be the low-income student rental assistance program, as well as the low-income family employment and rental assistance program. So that would be just over 2.6 million on this slide here that we have budgeted. And then moving to the next slide here, the child care support program for $25,000, as well as the after-school summer youth sports program. Both of those would qualify. And then all of the economic recovery programs, those would all qualify. So in total, we would have just over $6 million between the housing programs as well as these on this slide that I just mentioned.
Okay, and just to clarify, you said that monies that we already spent could be, I guess, returned to Measure S balance and taken out of the ARPA, right? It's not just monies that we have that we're carrying over and that we're spending, we're planning to spend this coming year.
Correct. Mayor Devine, council members, Councilmember Rotman, that is correct. Anything that we would have already spent could be basically replaced with ARPA funds and free up Measure S funding. That is my understanding. Until we get the official guidance, I'd like to preface that, but that is definitely my understanding.
Thank you.
Sure.
Madam Mayor,
Michelle, if I may. Oh, was there another question?
I have a question. This is Councilmember Kasakian.
Oh, okay. Councilmember Kasakian.
Sure. On the monthly housing rental subsidy program, which I guess is somewhat of a Glendale's version of, I guess, a universal basic income, how are we tracking or are we tracking whether this has been effective, successful? What are the measures by which we are going to track success or failure of this program, temporary program?
Mayor Devine, Councilmember Kasakian, Phil Lanzafame, our Director of Community Development, can respond to that question.
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, Councilmember Kasakian, the program was designed for some informal follow-up, but there is no formal tracking to see how did you spend it, what did you spend it on. We had talked about it, and it was get the money into their hands to use for rental assistance and other living expenses like prescriptions or transportation or anything like that. We were going to go back and ask how they were, but there was no formal tracking.
I would like to see some sort of survey and data that we can use to measure the success of this, of whether this was a worthwhile program or not. Obviously, it was temporary. We've given individuals who are in greatest need some assistance, but then this is going to come to an end at one point, and we need to figure out the impacts of that. Additionally, for the restaurant relief al fresco amount, this is just what we've spent from our Measure S funding, and I think the program has been a success, and we ought to look at seeing how some aspects of it can continue on beyond COVID. But what I would like to ask is, I know that, has DGA been involved in this? Did they put up any funds for any of the improvements in at least the downtown area, the Downtown Glendale Association?
The Downtown Glendale Association provided both tables and chairs, umbrellas, as well as the manpower to move those to different places. And then their standard cleanup, they've expanded a little bit to help clean up the parklets as their normal route through the city.
So the chairs are all provided by Downtown
Not
Glendale
all of the chairs.
Association?
We bought some tables and chairs. They provided some of those. I know that there was a period of time where we were waiting for our tables and chairs. They offered theirs to the merchants that needed them. They are out on RTOC, and they are standard out there. And then I think in 2 of the parklets, we've used their tables and chairs.
Okay, I'd like some more detailed information on what that breakdown was like as to how many how much they provided in terms of assistance and support for the programs that we instituted to help our merchants. And that's it for this moment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Michelle, I have a question, Ms. Flynn. Are you saying that the ARPA funding that we use, the $6 million, we could be reimbursed for that?
Yes, Mayor Devine. One of the broad categories of ARPA is for COVID assistance programs in your community. So with what council has appropriated here through Measure S, those programs, our understanding is they could qualify. Again, once I see the official guidance, we will know more, but I do believe that they would qualify.
Okay, and then we'd have $6 million more in our account.
Correct, if that is the direction of council.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Mayor Devine,
Mr. Brotman?
one more quick thing, just for the record, I would like to second Councilmember Kasakian's request for an analysis of the rental assistance program. And we know that several other cities have done universal basic income programs. So it'd be interesting to look at how what kind of metrics they're using to measure success. Maybe we can draw on some of that knowledge.
Okay. I'm going to move on to fiscal year 21-22, our proposed budget. Slide 9 provides council with a little bit of background on Measure S. If you recall from the November 2018 ballot, this is the language that Measure S indicated. Council at the time, when they decided to place this measure on the ballot, did see the 5-year forecast. They did recognize that the city is going into deficit positions, and this is why Measure S was placed on the ballot. So it's, as Mr. Galanian indicated earlier, that the programs that you will see are in line with the language from Measure S of these various items: repairing and upgrading local streets, providing affordable housing, maintaining local parks and community centers, maintaining police and fire station staffing, public safety, sustainability efforts, and other essential services.
So, Madam Chair, Madam Mayor,
Go ahead, Mr. Najarian.
so the bullet points that you list are not in the order that they were listed on the ballot measure. Is that correct?
Mayor Devine, council members, Councilmember Najarian. No, this was just, I believe, the language out of the fact sheet, which did list everything, and the ballot measure language is to the right.
I mean, the ballot measure language first talks about essential
Yes.
services,
Correct.
such as fire, paramedics, police, parks, recreation, senior, library, arts and culture, and affordable housing. And lastly, to improve streets and sidewalks. So when someone's reading the measure, and as this was put out to the voters, that's the order of items. Not to suggest that they are in priority, but that's the way it was presented to the voters. So I don't want the list that we've put on the left to indicate that is there's any sort of primacy in those lists of services.
Mayor Devine, council members, Councilmember Najarian, no, that language on the left is right off the fact sheet, on the back of the fact sheet that was out at the time. That was just the order. I mean, it's in no priority. It's just the order that was listed. That's how we did it.
And the fact sheet, I mean, let's be clear about this. The whole Measure S campaign was a campaign that was done outside the walls of City Hall, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Well, I hope so.
No,
I hope
yes.
it's more than I believe.
I would
because
defer
by
to
law,
Mike
by
Garcia.
law, it had to be outside. So the selection of the team that proposed this and the preparation of the uh, the fact sheets. I guess the city could put out a neutral fact sheet, but the entire campaign to promote Measure S was outside, definitely city council's purview and outside city staff purview. Is that correct, Mr. Garcia?
Councilman Najarian, that is correct. And again, the city, put together the ballot language that was approved by the council to put it on the ballot. The city was entitled and did put together educational and informational material about the measure, but the actual promotion of the measure was done by an outside organization of community members and organizations.
And I believe that we did have some discussion on the ballot language itself. It wasn't just a blanket approval. I know we had some discussion about which do we want to put first and where should we place affordable housing and other things like that. Does anyone else remember that?
Yes. yes.
Madam Chair, Madam Mayor.
Recall. I do recall.
It was a
Okay.
robust discussion, Mr. Najarian.
Yeah, it was robust. Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question
Councilmember Brotman.
on this topic? So there was a fact sheet that went out, right?
Right.
Who produced the fact sheet?
The fact sheet, I'm sure there were fact sheets by the proponents, but the city did put together a fact sheet as well. Again, just summarizing what was in the measure and what it could be used for.
Okay, did the fact sheet have words that are any different or in addition to what was actually on the ballot?
No.
No.
It may have expanded
So
on
it
it.
was word for word what's on the ballot. So this list, I guess what I'm getting at, this list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 bullet items, right? Does this come from a city-produced fact sheet?
Yes. In fact,
It
we can-
does?
Yes.
Okay, so when we talk about what we sold these 7 bullet points as a city.
Well, again, the city was not involved in the selling of this measure, was prohibited from doing so by law, but we were able to put information about what it would be used for. That's correct.
Okay, so we put this information out there, the city put this information out there. Also, for the record, I don't think it was as clean as you're saying, because I'm not going to go into it anymore, but I was at a meeting where one council member was pitching Measure S. So I think that we can't just say what was on the ballot is the sum total of what we communicated to voters about how this money would be spent. It does go beyond that.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
At the
Mr.
risk of sounding like
Councilmember.
someone who has just walked into the middle of a conversation and has no idea where this is going, may I ask Councilmember Najarian what the line of questioning was pertaining to, or why he brought up the issues that he did?
Councilmember Najarian?
I mean, we're here to discuss funding for Measure S projects. And I want to make it clear that that is not a list of priorities. I mean, we're giving two different samples here. I don't want it to be understood that there is a list of that the one on the left, the bullet points do not reflect the order that was placed on the ballot. And that was determined through city council action in terms of the exact wording that was placed and the exact language and sequence. What we're seeing on the left is different, and it's different than what's on the ballot. There's nothing in there in the bullet points about paramedics. I don't see anything there about senior services. I do see affordable housing. I do see other things. The point is that the bullet points, I don't think, are in a clear order, and may be misleading to anyone who can't see the fine print on the measure. Can see that, first priority was streets, second priority was affordable, third priority was parks, et cetera. So that's the point that I'm making.
So may I ask, Ms. Flynn, it wasn't the intention of this report to put those in order of priority, correct?
Madam Mayor, members of council, no, it was not. These bullet points are basically summarizing the information that was on the fact sheet to provide everyone kind of what the revenue from Measure S was to be utilized for. It's not intended to be in any priority. It's just a summary for this presentation, that's all.
Thank you.
And Madam Mayor, Member City Council, Council Member Najarian, you're correct. There is no order of priority on the list on the left side, and we haven't duplicated the language of the ballot, but try to capture everything else under other essential services.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Agajanian.
I didn't want to get involved with this discussion, but I just want to remind everybody, I was one of those that I was pushing for this measure. I was not in favor, actually, to raise taxes on the public, but however, I thought this is worthy cause, and I was pushing hard for the affordable housing, even then. That was the major issue that I had, and that was the major issue through my TV. I was pushing for this measure. And at the time, I wanted to limit this to housing and very few items. And I was told, if you push that by Mr. Garcia, that then to pass the measure would not be 50 plus 1, I mean, majority vote, would be 2/3 of the vote if I would say to be only affordable housing and anything to do with the housing. So I went along and we added few other items. Not the other items to be more important than housing. The housing is the major issue in Glendale. We do not have any other issue more important than housing. We see people are leaving the city, those who lived in here for 10 years, 30 years, they cannot afford. And the measure is, people believed, at least the way I presented, and I was firmly believed that this is to help specifically the housing in Glendale. Then one after another, they added to it. So this is just for the record, I wanted to mention that the major point to sell this item was the housing. So I wanted to be on the record anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you. And just to conclude this conversation, if I may, I think what we're trying to accomplish here in this particular slide is the essence of Measure S. And I think the overarching goal of Measure S funding, and the reason that we put it on the ballot, was to fund quality of life projects. And I think no matter how you look at it, all of these that are listed are quality of life projects to preserve and enhance our neighborhoods and our community. So with that, I think we can move on to the next slide. Thank you.
Okay. On slide 10, we are providing an update for council. As I mentioned earlier, because we have some history, we can give you some statistics and some trends that we're seeing in how the requests by each of the broad categories have been coming through. We went back to fiscal year 1920 is when the first year council appropriated Measure S funds, and that would be the information in the blue bar. So what this graph shows you is the various broad categories and where the funding has been spent or will be spent. So the blue part of the bar is the is the fiscal year 1920 revised budget. So we broke housing up into two categories: land acquisition and development, as well as assistance programs. And then we have infrastructure, parks and recreation, economic recovery, and other quality of life. The orange reddish color on the bar charts are the current year revised budget, and then the lighter green shade is next year's proposed budget. So what you can see from this chart is this coming year, the proposed budget for fiscal year 21-22 does touch quite a few of the categories on this that we've designated on this chart. Okay, slide 11 breaks down the current or the upcoming budget requests by category a little bit differently. So you can see 48% of the requests are under the two housing categories that we have. The purple shade, 21%, is under other quality of life. Parks and recreation is 12%. Infrastructure is 19%. Slide 12 will give you a recap. Our proposed revenues for fiscal year 21-22 is anticipated to be $24.8 million, and the proposed appropriations that you'll be reviewing today total $24.6 million. So we end the year with a little bit of a surplus of $175,000. Slide 13 projects the ending fund balance for next fiscal year. So if you recall, we have $8.5 million remaining at the end of this year. We incorporate the revenue and appropriations for the, as we're projecting for next year, and our projected ending balance at June 30th of 2022 would be just over $8.7 million. Okay, it's time to get into each of the categories and the programs. So each of the department directors responsible for these programs will be presenting to council. Mr. Lanzafame, you're up.
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, the first item, the request that we will have under housing is $3 million. This is to help fund 920 East Broadway. It is the cash contribution that will need to be competitive in the tax credit, which is the main financing source for this project. If you remember, 40 affordable housing units, it is a historic adaptive reuse. Michelle, could I have the next slide? We have added again $6 million for potential land acquisitions. There are, and let me back up to the last one. That project is coming to you this afternoon, so we'll have more discussion on that. We have added $6 million for land acquisition. That could be combined with the carryover from last year, and this is for opportunities that present themselves for additional affordable housing sites.
And that carryover amount is another $6 million.
The monthly housing rental subsidy program was a two-year program, is a two-year program. It's $8.4 million is the total cost. As of April of this year, we have qualified 530 households that are receiving that $300 a month subsidy. We have dispersed just over $1 million of that. Next year, we anticipate an additional, we're carrying over $2 million. You saw at the beginning of the presentation, we're asking for another $2 million. That would fund what we believe will be the balance of those getting their first year of assistance, as well as those that originally got it starting their second year. Next slide. Rental rights housing program. This program was very effective pre-COVID, and we found it invaluable during COVID. This has been the main hub of information for both landlords and tenants during the pandemic and the changing orders from the state, the county, as well as the city of Glendale. They do these things, education and outreach. We did produce 2 full-size mailers that went out to everybody, giving information about the different rules that go along with COVID, as well as the new state legislation that came with 2021. That is for staffing. This next request, $450,000, is really an estimate. The city council has asked us specifically for two items, a tenant landlord, we're calling it advisory body. We're not sure what that makeup is. That is coming to you later in June. And if we do that along with the rent registry program, which is another one that the council has asked us for, we anticipate 2 full-time and one-time employees will be necessary to staff those 2 programs. The rent registry, again, in the state, there's legislation to do that. We'll have to see how that pans out, but we'll bring forward a proposal to do something here in Glendale.
So the recap for housing is the $3 million for the development cash contribution at 920 East Broadway. That's one-time funds. An additional $6 million for potential land acquisition, again, one-time funds. The monthly housing rental subsidy program, part of the 2-year pilot program of $2 million. The rental rights program, which is a recurring program, $470,000, and then the new program for tenant and landlord services, which would be a recurring program as well, for $450,000. So in total, the housing category has a little over $11.9 million. Any questions here before we move to the next category?
Hearing none, go ahead, Ms.
Mayor Devine? Sorry, I was on mute. I just wanted to ask about the rental rights programs that were mentioned. First of all, on the existing one, not now, but maybe in June when you bring back this report on, what is the report on the landlord?
Tenant Landlord Advisory Board?
The, I forget the other thing. The registry, yeah, which I proposed, right. When you bring that back, could you also bring back some metrics on the rental rights program? You know, how many inquiries we're getting and what types, and to what extent are we doing mediation versus and dealing with individual situations as opposed to, you know, spending time on mailers and that kind of thing, just so we understand a little bit more what that office is actually doing. That's one thing I'd ask. And the other thing is the $450K for these 2 potential programs that we're going to discuss in June. I know that's just a plug number. You're not sure what the real number is. But I hope we could also look at a couple other components, which I haven't raised yet, but I could now or later, which is looking at the adequacy of the low cost or free legal assistance we provide to both tenants and landlords. I know we do, you know, there's some services through, I guess the group called Neighborhood Legal Services, is that right? And I don't think we pay into that, but just to understand what's the adequacy of those services and whether we might need to enhance them. And also a program that was discontinued years ago where we would do these habitability inspections on rental units. I understand that was pretty popular and we had to cut it when we were cutting budgets in, I guess, 2012, 2013. If we could also look at the potential to bring that back and what that might cost, that would be my suggestion, is to look at that kind of second tier of rental rights programs a little more broadly with some of these other components.
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, both of those ideas were discussed by the City Council, and at the time we moved away from them. We dust off that information and bring that back. I can tell you during the last fiscal year, because we anticipated the question, the rental rights program is taking in 2,000 calls. Approximately 1,800 of them are COVID related and information about COVID and the different rules. We've had 900 email. We didn't take any walk-in because we've been closed the last year, but we had 900 email inquiries. And then we did about 80, and we call them more moderated solutions. We're not really doing mediation, but we're a moderator for the solution. We'll go back and forth between tenant and landlord and try and work something out. The most common one is my rent got raised. I don't think it should have been. We'll contact the landlord, and sure enough, the landlord was not aware of whatever regulation there was and backed it out. So that is a brief summary of the activity that unit has engaged in the last year.
Thank you, Mr. Lanzafame. Got any further questions? Shall we go on to the next?
Sure, the next category is infrastructure, and our director of, oh, I'm sorry, Phil will do the first one.
The city council had asked for an update of the bicycle transportation plan during our study session earlier this year. We have included in this request, $125,000, which will be approximately half of the estimated cost. The other will be coming from Measure M. It really is to update best practices that have taken place in the industry since 2012 when we first adopted the program. We also have opportunities to make connections on the existing infrastructure that we've already built and now start to connect them to other routes, as well as look at some of the studies that we have conducted and some of the improvements that have been made to see if there's changes in the routes that we have that are being recommended through those studies. The West Glendale Transportation Plan, the PED plan, those things will inform this update and help us to bring it to a current standard.
Good morning, Madam Mayor, members of City Council, Yazdan Emrani, your Director of Public Works. One of the projects that we are requesting funding for out of Measure S is for our streets and roads. A few weeks back, we brought a report to your council on the condition of our pavement throughout the city. This was a updated report from our pavement management program that was recently completed. And our current pavement condition index, which is a measure between 0 and 100, stands at 72. In order to maintain this number, we need to request additional funds. Currently, we are spending about $4 million annually to spend on our roads and streets improvement. And in order to maintain that level, we need additional funding closer to $9 million. So we are requesting $4.5 million as part of this cycle for that purpose to maintain our roads. Otherwise, if we continue at the current funding levels, our PCI is going to dip down over the next 5 years to 60, which is not going to be satisfactory. So that's the first one. If we go to the next one. The other element that we are requesting funding is for our pedestrian and bike lane striping and configuration maintenance. These are very high maintenance because they're subject to wear and tear on an ongoing basis. And we want to make sure that these are always as clean and crisp as possible, so motorists as well as bicyclists as well as pedestrians can see and use them and enjoy them. So these would be, we're requesting $50,000 to include additional striping for bike lanes, sharrows, and then for pedestrian safety crosswalks.
Okay, to recap, for infrastructure, the bicycle transportation plan update, one-time project of $125,000. The pavement condition improvement project is a recurring $4.5 million, and the pedestrian and bike lane striping and configuration maintenance project, another recurring project at $50,000. So in total, fiscal year 21-22 infrastructure requests total $4,675,000.
I have a question for Mr. Emrani. On the pedestrian bike lane striping and configuration maintenance, 50,000 seems rather low, but this would not include the maintenance that we were talking about, the artwork and upgrading of certain crosswalks, correct?
Madam Mayor, that is correct. In fact, 50,000 is only half of what we've budgeted. We have another 50,000 that we budgeted for a total of $100,000 per year. But this would be for just routine restriping and would not include the additional painting of the crosswalks or the intersections that we talked about.
All right, thank you.
Mayor Devine, that additional, the other $50,000 is budgeted out of the general fund.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Is there another question?
yeah, I have a couple comments.
Councilman Brotman.
Yeah, one was similar to what you just raised on the striping, the bicycle striping and maintenance, or bicycle and pedestrian, I should say. It seems to me that kind of routine maintenance should be part of our general fund, and what we should be spending out of Measure S would be things like, the kind of a little bit more special and unique types of markings that we put down. And we've talked in the past, I think, about, I don't know if B-type Sharrow is the right term, but rather than just using Measure S money for doing regular maintenance, we could use it for doing, those enhanced Sharrows that are green, or, the bike lanes that are green, or the high visibility crosswalks, whether they're, artistically treated or not, these high visibility crosswalks. And I would encourage us, even if that means we're putting more than 50,000 in, to focus this money on some of those kind of enhanced markings. That's one comment. I also wanted to make a comment on the pavement condition improvement. I'm totally in favor of this. I know our roads need work. We have a lot of roads that need work, and I would encourage you, when we look at prioritizing the road segments, that we look for those segments where we can get extra bang for our buck. In other words, the pedestrian plan is calling for some treatments. The bike plan, once we redo it, is calling for some treatments, and we can also repair roads, so we can kind of hit three needs at once. And that would be, I would ask that as you work through the list of projects, because I know, there's so many more road segments that need work than we're going to possibly be able to do with $4.5 million, but we prioritize those segments. And then the last comment I wanted to make was on the bicycle transportation plan. Originally, when I saw this, I thought, how can we do this for 125? So I'm glad you're saying that's only half of it. I would suggest seriously looking at Nelson Nygaard, who did our pedestrian plan. They did such a great job, and there would be fantastic synergies to have our new bike plan be done by the same group and kind of integrated with what we're saying we're doing for our pedestrian environments. So that's all I have.
And thank you, Councilmember Brotman. I have another. Am I okay to speak?
Sure.
Okay. Going back to this configuration maintenance and the use of the artwork, perhaps we could, I guess this would come in suggestions, is to increase this amount to include a pilot project of perhaps in Adams Square, where they're looking at a dangerous intersection, that perhaps we could allot some extra funding here to paint that, use that as an street art project in the future, and see we can test the effectiveness of that sort of project. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, members of City Council, certainly we can do it that way. If it's council's desire, we can add to this category, this item in the category, or we can leave, you can leave a balance in the fund so that when Public Works has put together a project, a specific project, and we know the cost implications, we can bring that back to council, and you can always appropriate it out of Measure S as long as there's a fund balance in the future, near future.
Oh, I see. So in the future, if we decide, council decide to do that sort of a project, we can then suggest that it comes from Measure S funding. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am.
To simplify? Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Madam Mayor, I want to ask Mr. Amrani one question
Yeah.
for clarification.
Councilmember Kasakian?
Thank you. Mr. Amrani, a few weeks ago, you brought us, I thought, a very well-presented report on the state of our roads and the repaving and the metrics by which you are tackling the problem. So this amount that's in Measure S is part of that presentation, correct? This only maintains to a certain level the condition of our roads while there's still a gradual degradation of the quality of the roads. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make that clear for anyone watching who thinks that it perhaps only costs $4.5 million a year from Measure S funds to maintain the roads in the conditions that they are, the conditions that our residents are accustomed to, and maintaining a certain quality of life in the city, that this is just barely, it's putting one finger in one hole in the dike and plugging a leak when there's so many others springing up in other places. So we have to, I bring this up also because in addition to this discussion, and as we go through this budget discussion holistically, we have to look at other long-term solutions. Thank you.
That is very accurate, Councilmember Kasakian. As Mr. Imrani mentioned, this $4.5 million is only half of what we need to spend on an annual basis just to maintain the pavement condition that we have in place today. It will not improve it, but just to maintain it on an annual basis moving forward. So $9.5 million a year minimum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Councilmember Najarian?
thank you. I mean, that's a very good point. And is this the point where we perhaps say, let's boost that pavement condition fund
Madam Mayor.
to a significant amount?
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, Councilmember Najarian, I would suggest to wait till the end. Ms. Flynn will present all of these items in a spreadsheet for council's consideration. At that point in time, you can add, delete, adjust the figures and the requested dollar amounts as you see fit.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Flynn?
Okay. On to Parks and Recreation. So we'll have Mr. Bolanikian.
Good morning, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Onik Bolanikian, Director of Community Services and Parks. We do have a few projects that we'll be requesting funding for. The first one is our year-round aquatics program. Next year will be our third year operating year-round. Just want to note that Pacific Pool was one of few pools in the LA County area that was open during the pandemic. We did modify our program and had minimal recreation swim and lap swim open to the residents in Glendale. So we did operate year-round this past year. Next year's program, we would like to continue to include swim lessons, recreation swimming, master swimming, rented out to our swim clubs, have classes, dive-in movies, and special events. This past year, the year-round program operates September through May. But September through March, we had a total of 21,000, a little over 21,000 residents using the swimming pool. So we are requesting 636,000 in Measure S funds to operate the year-round aquatics program. The next slide, please. The annual community events, we're requesting 83,000. The annual community events were funded through the general fund, but this past year, due to COVID, we cut those events and we cut the funding. This year, we are asking for Measure S funds. Cruise night in the amount of $50,000. This is for the summer 2022 event. The summer 2021 event has been basically modified to what we did last year. We will have residents cruise up and down Brand for an hour or so, show off their cars, display their cars. But an actual cruise night event is canceled for 2021. The $50,000 is for preparation for cruise night event 2022. We start signing contracts in March of each year for the following year, for the following summer event. Movies, music, and more in the amount of $23,000. This is for our summer concert series. We have 5 summer concerts at the north end of Verdugo Park. This will also include 1 or 2 theater performances and possibly drive-in movies at one of our park locations. And then lastly, the Montrose Christmas Parade. We fund this event. We're a sponsor in the amount of $10,000, and we provide these funds to the Montrose Shopping Park Association for the annual Christmas parade.
Madam Mayor, if I can
Councilmember
just,
Kasakian.
I'd like to ask a question. So these are what's proposed for the coming year, correct?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, great job on all of these programs. I think especially the movies, music, and more has grown tremendously over in popularity. It's more and more people are attending it every year, and I think in a city like ours, as large as it is, as spread out as the different communities are, these type of events that bring people together are essential for people to see their neighbors, for families to hang out and enjoy our outdoors and see what facilities we have and what programs we have. And also, as a way to educate folks when we have them all congregated in one place. I do want some clarification because I know that this has always been, or has recently been, the elephant in the room regarding this ice rink expenditure, which came out of Measure S funding, correct? There's varying statements out there, some saying it was $500,000 expenditure, others saying it was only $150,000. How much was spent on the ice rink? What was the actual cost of it? I just want to know for myself and for the public to know what was spent.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Kasakian, I believe the actual expenditures were around $360,000, and we did bring in a revenue in about $140,000 in revenue.
Okay. So it did cost the city $360,000.
Yes.
Okay. Good to know.
The next request is Glorieta Park concession building renovation with the request of the community and the concessionaire. We would like to expand the tennis concession building, renovate the restrooms, and have a waiting area for the public to watch their participants at the Glorieta Tennis Complex. The $75,000 funds will pay for design and development only. The actual construction costs, once when we get a better number of how much the project will cost, we'll come back to council the following year and request additional Measure S funds. The next project, Fremont Park renovation, we're requesting $2 million for this project. We currently have a budget of $11,650,000. Budget available as of February 28th of this year is $10 million, a little over $10 million. The project will include a community building, 3,500 square feet, brand new splash pad, a number of picnic shelters, additional 35 parking spaces, brand new basketball court, pickleball courts, fitness equipment, walking path, new playground, and also a artificial turf multi-purpose field. We are requesting $2 million. We do need we need a total of 6. So $2 million Measure S, and we'll be requesting an additional $1 million in DIF. And we will come to council within the next month and a half for a Section 108 loan through our CDBG program in the amount of $3 million, similar to what we did with Essentia a few years back, where we asked for a loan through Section 8 CDBG, Section 108 through CDBG, and we paid it off in 8 years. So this is an amount of $2 million.
I have a question, Mr. Bolanikian.
Yes.
When is the renovation of Fremont Park expected to be complete? This is it seems like we keep funding this project, and where do we stand as far as completion?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, that is the next slide. I do have a slide
Oh, sorry.
about, no worries, about the timeline. So we will be receiving our RFPs for construction management services tomorrow. We will come to council for an authorization to execute the construction management contract in June. So all in all, we're hoping that the construction will start October 2021 with an estimated completion date of May of 2023.
Okay, very good, excellent. Thank you.
The next project is to expand our battery-operated, electric-operated equipment and infrastructure. We would like to expand this program to seven facilities. We will be purchasing electric battery-operated leaf blowers, edgers, and hedge trimmers. The $100,000 will include both the equipment and upgrade of the infrastructure. Eventually, we would like to expand this program to all of our park facilities. We did get preliminary numbers that will cost around little over $300,000 to expand to all of our facilities, not including the upgrading of our infrastructure, electrical equipment. Next slide. And then the last project we're requesting is $25,000 for Rockhaven maintenance. This includes utilities that we pay for and some minor ground maintenance to maintain the facility on a year-round basis.
Okay, so in summary, on slide 35, under Parks and Recreation, we have the year-round aquatics program. That's a recurring program for $636,000. Annual community events, which are recurring at $83,000. Glorietta Park concession building renovation, recurring project for $75,000. Fremont Park renovation, one-time funding of $2 million. The electric operated equipment and infrastructure, another recurring project for $100,000, as well as the Rockhaven maintenance recurring project at $25,000. In total, fiscal year 21-22 Parks and Rec requests are $2.9 million. Any questions here?
Mayor Devine?
Yes, Councilmember Brotman?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, and this should not come as a surprise to Onig or Rubik, but I'm vehemently opposed to any spending on fake grass, on plastic grass. So I couldn't possibly support a Fremont Park renovation that has fake grass in it. We can talk about the heat island effect and other things another time. I know, as you probably know, the Parks Commission recently voted to oppose fake grass. So I want to make that point clear. The other thing I want to say is I do support us expanding the electric landscaping work to our other parks. And I don't know if, Onig, you mentioned all the other parks, but, Verdugo, Brand, Sports Complex, Pacific Park, Duke Majan, and Fremont are not, I guess those are the ones that are not on the list. But I would like to see us do that. I don't think there's any reason to delay. And I think that's a worthy investment of Measure S dollars to clean our air and to especially to protect the health of our groundskeepers.
Madam
We'll
Mayor,
get to that at the end, I think. Councilmember Kasakian?
In addition to all these, the only question I have regarding Rock Haven, since it was on here, and the maintenance, I support this expenditure, but I don't know if it's appropriate to bring this up now or for it to come up at a later discussion for us to have, allocate some funds to have an assessment of the condition of the structures on that property. I know there may have been discussion of this in the past, but, you know, it would be good for us to know what condition they are in now, and if that means, if it's currently happening, or if it's going to happen, I'd like someone that the city works with to do that assessment versus relying on any individual associated or group company associated with a potential developer or someone who would acquire that property.
Mr. Galanian?
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, Councilman Kasakian, staff is engaged in that now with a third party, not a developer, just so that we know independently condition, and we'll come back to you with 3 options. What is it just to put them in place, and what is it to make them a shell, and what is it to make them habitable? And then we'll be able to have a
Excellent.
more
Thank
informed
you.
discussion then.
So in that regard, then there is no need for us to put any more funds into this Rock Haven maintenance. They're separate issues, from what I understand.
They are
As it
separate
relates
issues.
to this.
These dollars, I'll let Mr. Bulanikian.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the 25,000 is for maintenance, just ground maintenance and utilities.
Okay.
We have allocated, or we are coming to council in the next couple of weeks as part of our CIP project, allocating 300,000 to redo some of the roofs that need to be replaced.
Thank you.
Oh, good, great.
Okay, I believe we can move on to other quality of life items at this time.
Good morning, Mayor Devine, members of council, Carl Pavlidis, Police Chief. Police Department does have a couple of requests. The first one deals with mental health resources. As you know, mental health homeless outreach issues continue to be a challenge, not only for Glendale, but for the entire region. We currently have one mental health clinician assigned to the police department from the Department of Mental Health. That one doesn't cost that, but we get 40 hours a week of service out of that, so we have limited hours. As we assess our calls for service and the issues that we're dealing with and the follow-ups that would allow us to be more effective in addressing these issues, we would like to be able to add another mental health clinician. So we would not be adding somebody to the police department. This would actually be a contract with the Department of Mental Health or another organization to provide that service in the field, and that would cost us approximately $200,000 a year. Our second request involves some vehicle replacements that cannot be supported by the general fund right now. I have a few vehicles that are old and in very rough condition, and they are in strategic places in the department. Slowly but surely, we're trying to eliminate our Crown Victorias, which are now in the ballpark of 10 to 12 years old. 2 of those are used by our special enforcement detail, and that detail addresses some of the crime and quality of life issues that we all experience, whether that would be catalytic converter theft, some of the gang-related issues that we're now starting to see increasing on our border. And they're also used by our patrol officers to do directed enforcement activities. Those vehicles do not currently have our in-car camera systems, and they, as I said, they are in rough condition, and to be able to upgrade those. We will also be upgrading a vehicle for what we now call our community Outreach Resources and Engagement Bureau. That's where our mental health folks are located, to replace a plain vehicle there. Again, some value in not always having marked vehicles, especially when dealing with mental health issues. There's now evidence out there that shows that sometimes using unmarked vehicles is a more effective way to deal with those and to be able to de-escalate those situations. And the remaining cars, one is to deal with recruitment. People actually do pay attention to what we have and to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward as we recruit personnel. And then one is a surveillance vehicle. Those are, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions? Okay, moving on.
Okay, I'm going to take this one for Fire Chief Lanzas, who's on an airplane as we speak, but I know Battalion Chief Jeff Ragusa is here if we have any more detailed questions. So the request is for $1.5 million in order for the Glendale Fire Department to be able to replace annually the important firefighting apparatus and equipment that they utilize in the fire department. This would be ambulances, fire engine, or a ladder truck. The department does respond to almost 20,000 emergency incidences each year, so having a safe, reliable fleet is obviously very crucial to our community. And the idea is for annual replacement of at least one of these apparatus each year. Otherwise, we run into an issue like we had in 2005, where 6 apparatus were replaced in one fiscal year, and that does get very, very costly. So this is to help support that annual replacement each year. And I should add, the replacement cycle on ambulances is every 10 years, and the engines and ladder trucks are every 20 years.
Good morning again, Madam Mayor, members of City Council. This next ask is for our annual school crossing guard program. Currently, Public Works manages this program, which is 3 to 4 hours a day in 35 locations. And some of those examples are shown here. We did not expend all of the funds we had for this last year because of the COVID. We ended up spending a little bit of it towards the end when some of the schools opened up. However, the prices for these types of programs have gone up tremendously. And as a result, we are requesting $511,000 to fund the next full school year. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. Gary Schaefer, Director of Library Arts and Culture. Up next is the Central Library Children's and Teen Room spaces. As you're aware, we recently contracted to hire architects to design out these spaces and would like to recommend to Council that we set aside funds in preparation for the construction of those same spaces. If we can go to the next slide. As you know, the children's room was value engineered out of the initial renovation that took place in 2017. Great cities have great libraries, and we certainly have one of the most beautiful libraries in Central. And we would like to invest in our youngest of our residents, and so thus propose the children's room be renovated, as well as a new space created for teens who actively use the library. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Hearing none.
Thank you.
Moving on.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, members of City Council, back to me on this next item. As you know, we have, per Council's direction, established an Office of Sustainability, and you are well familiar with David Jones's work, a lot of work that he has on his plate. So this is just a request to provide some help for him in that office with many ongoing items that this office is working on. And this would be at an admin associate level, and the cost just over $81,000 annually.
This is, excuse me, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Councilmember Longjanian.
When we were discussing about sustainability office, I remember at that time I was complaining that we start with one and then with that department will grow, will be 2, 3, and Yasmin, the sitting city manager at the time, said, no, we just will hire one person and that person will handle this department. And this is what, I'm glad that is recorded. We have to go and bring the record that she was assuring that this is only one person we will hire. And now, slowly but surely, we will have another person will be hired, and at later time, somebody else will be hired, and then a few years later will be a big department will be under Sustainability Office.
Madam
This
Mayor,
is what I was anticipating anyway. I asked at the time also, I said, how one person will do this job? I said, no, one person will handle this. We will hire an experienced person and we'll handle this office. Okay, thank you. Yes, you were going
Mr.
to.
Galanian.
yeah, Madam Mayor, Member City Council, Councilmember Agajanian, I don't exactly recall that conversation with my predecessor or her comments, but perhaps at the time, we hadn't established the Sustainability Commission, and judging by the sheer number of items that this office is working on, it's just absolutely necessary to provide additional resources for this office to be successful. Otherwise, all the workload and all the stuff that Mr. Jones and the Sustainability Commission are going to be working on will get delayed if we didn't provide this resource to them. And this is just point of clarification, is not a separate department, but a part of the city manager's office's operation. And as you recall, we have eliminated 2 positions from that office.
Yeah, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Najarian.
I mean, I agree with Mr. Agajanian. I mean, it's ironic that the Sustainability Office is not sustainable, that we have to dip into Measure S funds for a full-time position, including the PERS contributions, pensions, benefits. I really want to resist doing that, perhaps, and I haven't seen the agendas on the Sustainability Commission, but, you know, they have to be measured. Every commission that we have is measured in the number of items when I say measured, I don't mean evaluated. They are discrete in the number of items that they take and handle. And Mr. Jones maybe just needs to prioritize the items and go through them in a manner that he's staffed. This shouldn't come out of Measure S. I mean, police, homeless outreach, I think is one thing that we were talking about. That's a little different than serving a commission that, I mean, it shouldn't come out of Measure. I'm not saying it shouldn't be funded, but it should not come out of Measure S. And we said we weren't going to get into pensions and, the whole PERS thing. And this is one foot in the door for using Measure S in a way that I don't think it was intended in the ballot measure or the council intended it when it was put forward.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'd like to add that, it's early in the process right now. I mean, this is a new position, a new office, and perhaps it seems overwhelming in the beginning, but once he, Mr. Jones kind of gets his feet on the ground and grasps the mission of this office, things will settle down for him and it won't be as overwhelming. And I totally agree that we should not be spending Measure S funding for a salaried position, which includes pensions. I agree with that. So I'm not going to be in favor of this allocation. Thank you.
Mayor Devine?
Councilmember Brotman.
Okay, yeah, I need to say something here. So
Sure.
first of all, when you look at the total allocations that we've put out here today for Measure S, if we look at what we're applying to sustainability, it's less than 1.5%. Yet sustainability was one of the items we sold this program on. And I know people that voted for Measure S because sustainability was listed on the city's list of priorities. 1.5% And I'm being generous. I'm including the landscaping equipment, this office, the bicycle transportation plan, and the 50,000 for striping bike and pedestrian facilities. Less than 1.5%. I think that's shameful. And to then talk about an issue with $81,000 for an office. We have how many people doing rental rights? Are those not employees? Are they not PERSable? That's $470,000. I'm sorry, but sustainability is our lives. Sustainability is something we're going to have to spend more and more on, and we're going to have to care about a lot more if we want a city that's livable. Okay, so I find this conversation shocking, to be honest.
Any other comments? Okay, let's move on.
Okay, slide 44 gives you a recap of the other quality of life items that were just presented. And if there was ever any question on the budget being a team effort, I think today definitely demonstrated that with everyone's help. So thank you, everybody, all our department directors. On this slide, the additional mental health resources is a recurring project for, or a recurring item for $200,000. The police vehicles that the chief talked about, one-time cost of $300,000. The firefighting apparatus, recurring cost of $1.5 million. The school crossing guard program, recurring cost of $511,000. The library children's teen room renovation project, one-time cost of $2.5 million, and the sustainability office support staffing, recurring cost of a little over $81,000. So this brings the total fiscal year 21-22 other quality of life requests to be just under $5.1 million. These next two slides will just recap again in each of the categories for council, the 5 different projects under housing totaling $11.9 million. The infrastructure projects, there's 3 projects there for $4.675 million. Parks and recreation, we have 6 projects there for $2.9 million, and the other quality of life items at a little, just under 5.1. Total appropriation requests, $24.6 million. Slide 47 shows you again what the proposed fiscal year 21-22 proposed budget looks like as far as revenues and these proposed appropriations, leaving a net surplus of $175,000 for the current fiscal year. Adding in the previous year's fund balance, you will end the year with approximately $8.7 million. So let me just quickly review the calendar while we have the slides up for you, and then we'll go to the spreadsheet that Ms. Adriana Sion will manage through WebEx, and then council can have their discussion on each of the programs, and we can tally that up for you as we go. So slide 49 shows you part of the rest of, some of the rest of the upcoming budget study session calendar. So today is the discussion we're having on Measure S. Thursday this week, May 6th, we'll have session number 3 at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. This will be the first of departmental presentations, and you'll see the city clerk, city attorney, human resources, as well as community services and parks. Next Tuesday will be session number 4, more department presentations with library, Glendale Water and Power, and the police department. Thursday, May 13th is study session number 5 at 9 o'clock. Additional departments of information services, community development, and public works. And then May 18th, we'll finish off the department presentations. That's on Tuesday at 9 a.m. with the city treasurer, finance, city manager, and the fire department. And then the last study session will be on the 20th of May, which is a Thursday, 9 o'clock in the morning. We'll recap in a summary and provide council with any follow-up items. June 8th is the budget hearing, as well as adoption at 6 p.m. during the regular council meeting. Okay, at this time, I think we'll turn it over. Our city clerk can stop sharing, and then Mrs. Sion will take over, and we'll let council have their discussions.
Kasayan.
Hi, good morning, Councilmember Devine, council members. I'm putting up a spreadsheet that I will be sharing in a second that shows a list of all the projects and programs that you saw earlier, and we can go through one by one and seek your approval for the 21-22 budget. So here's the worksheet, and it starts with all the housing projects. So I'm not sure if you want to go through one by one or what the direction's going to be, but the first project on the list is the Affordable Housing Development 920 East Broadway project.
Why don't we just go through it, if I may, Audrey, take them by category, and if anyone has a change that they want to make, perhaps that's what would be the easiest way, quickest way.
Sure. So there's 11.9 million proposed for all the housing projects. So are all these projects approved as a whole, or anything, or is anything up for discussion?
Madam Mayor, I'm fine with the projects as they are listed for the housing section.
Thank you, Councilmember Kasakian. Anyone have any objections to any of these? Otherwise, we'll simply okay the allocations. Councilmember Broderick.
Yeah, no, I have no objections, but I was just going to suggest that at 450 for the rental rights program, we might want to kick that up a little bit, depending on what we end up doing there. If we do anything with legal services, if we do anything with habitability, it's going to maybe be a little more. So that would be my only suggestion, is maybe make it 500,000 just so we have room. And if we don't spend it, we can bring it back into unallocated amounts.
Are there any objections to that?
I mean, I would like to know a little bit more detail what what are we doing here? Are we paying for private attorneys to defend tenants? Are we subsidizing neighborhood legal services? Are we paying damages that tenants cause upon move out? I mean, there's it's a very broad spectrum that hasn't been determined yet. So I'm not opposed to the 500, but at some point, I'd like to see exactly what we're doing in detail on.
Yeah, if I could just, what I had in mind was really more of neighborhood legal services. Maybe we would fund additional, maybe dedicated resources to Glendale or something. I'm not thinking about us getting involved in defending or getting involved in legal action directly, no.
Well, I think if I may, gentlemen, this is a ballpark figure. We can raise it later or not. There are a lot of unanswered questions as far as what the program will consist of. So I would suggest that we leave it at 450, and then if the department housing decides they need more, we can always allocate. Is that?
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mayor, I would like to also tell you there's 2 callers on the line waiting, and the third one just came in.
Well, then let's take them. I'm sorry I didn't ask. Before we go through this budget, let's go ahead and take the 2 callers. Let's
Before we take the callers,
each.
Madam Mayor, before we take the callers,
Yes.
can I just make a general comment? And even before we go through this spreadsheet,
Yes.
I thought, this presentation was a decent overview, but ultimately, and I know this has been brought up before, it would be helpful for me, and I hope to my colleagues, to know more specifics about these programs that we're suggesting. Not all of them necessarily, because we can't do it for all of them, but to understand what are our goals, what are we trying to achieve, and how we're measuring success within those goals, so we can know whether the money that we're going to allocate, whether we're going to increase or decrease, has is worth it, is appropriate, and whether it's going to help in achieving those goals. And saying that we're having a rental rights program and we've done a couple of mailers and we've done outreach, I don't know how many people have actually benefited from it. There is a question as to whether, if it's only a dozen people and we spent nearly $500,000, is that the best approach? Is there a better way of doing it? We have innovation division that's tasked with trying to find efficiencies. And so I would like us to approach these discussions of the budget with that in mind. What is it that we're trying to achieve? How is it that we're trying to achieve it? And how do we measure the successful achievement of those goals? Thank you. That's my feedback
Thank you, Mr.
for staff.
And Mayor Devine, members, City Council, just
Yes.
wanted to add a comment that, as Ms. Flynn mentioned, on May 20th, as part of a budget study session number 7, we have we have an item for follow-up items, and we can certainly bring back any item that council has requested more information on that date.
Is that adequate for you, Councilmember Kasakian?
To be honest, not necessarily, because I would like us to know, it doesn't have to necessarily even be done in a presentation. Maybe it can be presented on a dashboard or website, but we need to know what is it that the goal is. I know that there's key performance indicators for each department. I don't even know if we've necessarily gone through those key performance indicators. I assume you will when we go through each department. But we need to know that presents the context in which we're allocating funds. We're spending taxpayer money here. We ought to know whether it's effective. And if it's not, then we pull it and we put it somewhere else. We take it from, let's say, one program and put it into the other where we're seeing it having a better impact.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Member City Council, Councilmember Kasakian, that's a very valid point. We have started a dedicated website for a performance measure and key performance indicators, and that will be part of what we intend to do moving forward, updating those numbers. So just like you mentioned, there has to be a basis for doing what we do and to make sure it's successful. Otherwise, it'll have to be modified.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Galani.
Madam Mayor,
Okay, shall we go?
Madam Mayor, we have
Yes.
5 callers at this time. How many minutes would you like to give them?
Okay.
And would you like me to continue accepting calls?
Let's give them three minutes, and let's cut it off right now because we're ready to discuss.
Thank you. Start off with the first one. Greg Asturian, you're live. You have 3 minutes, Greg. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, council members. Let me just get myself out of speaker. Good morning, Madam Mayor and council members. It's a pleasure being able to address your body. I am calling because we oppose rent registry, period. Therefore, any allocation of potential budget to this item, we also will oppose it. We oppose rent registry for the several reasons. I will just share with you 3 updates I've shared with your staff in a letter dated 4/7/2021. First, rental registry concepts serve a regulatory purpose, such as rent control. City of Glendale is not a rent-controlled city. Second, your staff has been doing a fabulous job with your rental rights program, regardless how that will change or if technology will have a role in it, as Councilmember Kasakian just suggested. So it's a program that we believe in. We think that it should be continued, perhaps in a better format and with the application of great technology that is available today. Third, currently proposed legislation, AB or Assembly Bill 1188, alluded to by Mr. Lanzafame, has been all but gutted out. In other words, 95% or so of its obtrusive elements have been taken out of the legislation, and the only thing that remains is for the State Department of Housing and State Development to actually curate data for the next 10 years from the affordable housing units that the state has jurisdiction upon. So in other words, there is no more market rental rate registry required by Assembly Bill 1188. In fact, it's interesting that that bill didn't even make your legislative tracking list, which you will be discussing later on tonight. So we respectfully ask that the potential budget for register or rental registry be diverted to your rental right program instead, because you have something that works and works well, and perhaps it could be even better. With that, I thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Astorian. Next caller.
Jane Patel, you're live. Jane, go ahead.
Hi, I'm a 16-year resident of Glendale and currently a commissioner for the Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Commission. According to the Los Angeles Countywide Comprehensive Park and Recreation Needs Assessment in 2015, South Glendale had only 0.3 acres of park space versus the rest of the county, which averages 3 acres of park space per 1,000 people. That is dreadful. Our development in South Glendale has grown significantly in the past few years since that report was released, only putting more strain on the few open green spaces South Glendale has, while no additional park space has been acquired. Open green space helps to reduce heat island effects within a city. Yet looking at a map of Glendale, there are huge swaths of no open green space. We will be losing open green space shortly at the very park that is in the center of South Glendale. Yet there are no plans to replace it. As we move toward modernizing our city infrastructure, we must recognize that this will include managing traffic and transportation. Less people will have cars. That means in South Glendale it will be harder for people to access open green space. This will take a toll on families, especially those with young children. South Glendale has a very large population of renters living in apartments and ADUs who do not have yards. These people will be most affected. Young children need a place to run around, to experience the outdoors, and to play. Transporting babies and young children on public transportation just to get to a park will be time-consuming and costly for parents every day who already have the strain of a possible loss of two-income family in order to care for children, and the mental health strain of not having a park you can readily access when caring for a child will take its toll. Parks help to create community. They are at the heart of a neighborhood. It's where people don't have anywhere to go, can go outside to congregate. It's where a parent can sit and perhaps take a much-needed break while their child plays. It's where families and neighbors go, where they can meet each other. It's where children have birthday parties who live in small homes with no yards. It's where people can walk their dogs. The cost of land in Glendale is high, and it's not going to get any cheaper. There has not been the acquisition of new park space in South Glendale in decades, yet our population continues to rise. The new development fees from developers required to be put aside for parks is not enough of a percentage in comparison to land costs in Glendale. And as those fees must be used within 5 years, it is almost never applied to acquiring new land. Additional monies are needed to come from elsewhere for the city to get anywhere close to affording the purchase of new park space. And for the city budget to not have any money put aside to acquire new space each year indicates the city has no real plans to rectify this significant problem, which will only increase in years to come. A couple additional suggestions for sustainability. Nothing is being put aside for the pedestrian plan. This could help provide some green space, especially in the areas where our city is significantly lacking. Recently, the Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Commission gave recommendation for natural turf rather than artificial turf playing fields. Having the park
Ms.
development
Patel,
budget
thank you.
adjusted
3
for
minutes
this.
is up. Ms. Patel?
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments, if I may. Ms. Patel mentioned us losing a park in Glendale, and I don't know if she was talking about Central Park, because we are actually increasing the area of that park. And then she also mentioned that we don't ever put aside money for parkland, and that's not true, because we did last year, and more than likely we will put aside some funding this year. That's to be decided, but we are very concerned about park space in South Glendale, and it is one of our the one focus that we're always kind of looking to increase and to add to South Glendale. So let's take the next caller with that being said.
David Eisenberg, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm getting a feedback, and I don't have volume on. Good afternoon, Mayor Devine and council members. I'm the chair of the Verdugo Hills Group of the Sierra Club, and I've been a Glendale resident and homeowner since 1985. And I'm calling about first of all, the Fremont Park plan that's in this agenda for $2 million. We have some basic concerns about what's going on with that park. You know, there's a place in parks where there's trees and grass and people can lay around and it's not overdeveloped. And this plan is very similar to the plan that was brought before council about Verdugo Park. I believe they wanted to spend $60 million to do the same type of let's develop everything. And I remember Councilmember Najarian, raised a point. You know, this was good a few years ago, but we know differently now. And that plan was taken off. And I believe the same look should be made at, what's actually necessary at Fremont Park, and do we need to spend another $2 million? Another part of that plan that's very concerning is the idea of using artificial turf. I mean, this is a known hazard environmentally. It is, dangerous to play on. There's a higher injury rate. I looked at the city reports before they had them on the website, and then they took them off that showed, a survey with no serious knee injuries from grass fields, but 9 serious knee injuries from turf fields. Surgeries, when I say serious, I mean injuries. Those are injuries requiring surgery. We have a petition that we presented to the Parks Department. We now have 200 supporters on that petition, and we'll present it to City Council whenever the decision is actually made on whether to go for this, opposing artificial turf. We're also very concerned about the sustainability office. We don't want this to be, okay, we have a sustainability office, so we're doing a good job on sustainability. That's not enough. We have a severe environmental and climate crisis. To say one person, we're not going to give him any help, he's going to do it all himself. Maybe he'll do something. We'll get something delayed.
Mr. Eisenberg, thank you very much.
Real...
Mr. Eisenberg, your 3 minutes is up. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you for listening. Bye.
Next caller.
Monica Campagna. Monica?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, Madam Mayor and council members. This is Monica Campagna, Glendale resident. I just had a few comments I'd like to share before you continue your budget discussions. I just want to say in general, this budget is full of programs that I support. There was a few omissions, and there really is a lack of funding for sustainability programs and initiatives. And I'm just going to read. I did vote for this measure, and in part because one of the bullet points on the flyer I got from Glendale said, supporting Glendale's sustainability efforts to create long-term economic, social, and environmental solutions. So in addition to caring about a lot of other things in our city, I actually really do care about that, and I think that, less than 1.5%, as Mr. Brotman said, is really not enough. And we have... if we get $6 million in ARPA funding back, and if we have $8.7 million left in reserve, I think we really could expand upon what we're putting aside to look ahead and deal with some of the issues we know that we're going to be facing with heat and with reliability. So here are my notes. I like the funding on the pavement condition program, but I do agree that it should be focused on those locations incorporated in the pedestrian plan first and really showcase those new things, bring something exciting to our city with that, and something I think residents would really support, because traffic issues here, as we know, are a huge issue. I don't know which items I'm about to say are a part of other budgets. I apologize if I'm bringing up things that are going to go somewhere else. But a climate action plan, we have to have that. This is like a central priority for our sustainability director. And while I'm on sustainability director, I can't believe we're not supporting the idea of him having an assistant for that incredibly important work. If it doesn't come from this funding, please let it come from somewhere else. It's a very small amount of money, and he has a huge agenda in front of him that will benefit all residents here. I support the landscaping equipment conversion. Very happy to see those locations are in areas of the city that could really use the pollution reduction. And I support taking advantage of the SCAQMD funding incentives right now to go ahead and go full on and take care of that entire program in one shot. I support a plan to electrify the city fleet. I don't see that in here. I think that would be very helpful, especially as we're looking right now at possibly replacing 3 police vehicles. Right here, we could be looking at a plan that could help us make that decision on what kind of vehicles. An updated recycling website like Burbank has would be really helpful. More bioswales, which
Monica,
okay, I'm out of time. I have
Yes,
more,
thank
but I
you.
guess
Thank you
I'll
for
leave it
calling.
off. Thank you. All right, thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you,
bye.
Monica.
Next caller.
Alec Barsasov. Alec, you're live. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, members of the council. Thanks for taking my call. My name is Alec Bartrosov, resident of Glendale. I also serve on the Sustainability Commission. I voted for Measure S myself because I also got a flyer in the mail that outlines that one of the reasons why we're pursuing this is that we want to advance our sustainability goals in the city. So as I'm watching this presentation and looking at the slides, I'm seeing really a drop in the bucket when we're talking about sustainability investments. I really support the Park Department initiative to go electric with their maintenance equipment. I don't think that's enough. I think David Jones's position should be reinforced with additional staff. I also feel strongly as a transportation planner that we need to invest in our infrastructure. I think the $4.5 million allocation is important, but I would tie that specifically to the pedestrian plan and the bicycle plan. We have the pedestrian plan's 5-year implementation cost is $27 million. So we have this plan. We spent 3 years working it out. It's time to move into action. And if we don't have millions of dollars set aside for that plan, it is not going to get implemented. So we've stated for many years that pedestrian safety is a priority for us. We have an adopted plan. And now that plan has associated dollars to implement that plan. So if we were to allocate about $5 million for the next 5 years, we would be actually able to accomplish that goal of implementing the short-term priorities of that pedestrian plan. So if you're going to spend $5 million on infrastructure, I really, really, really hope that you tie that to pedestrian improvement and bicycle improvement. And by doing that, you are allocating a good chunk of money towards sustainability initiatives in the city of Glendale. So aside from the infrastructure, I'm hoping you can focus on other initiatives that were mentioned to address sustainability. I would hate to see Measure S go down as something that is not advancing sustainability goals. And as of right now, I'm not seeing much of that. So hopefully you can discuss amongst yourselves how to invest more in sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Next caller.
Mayor, that was the last
Next
caller.
caller. Okay, so let's continue then on the, I do have a comment to make on the calls that we've gotten. You know, if there were programs that we could support with Measure S funding, I would be all in favor of it, and I think favor of them. But I think what we're objecting to is another position, which we can always find in another fund, that we don't have to use Measure S funding for that particular item. So with that, let's move on.
Thank you, Mayor Devine. Council members, looking at the next category on our worksheet is the list of infrastructure projects that total 4.6 million, a little over 4.6 million. So we're seeking direction on this grouping of projects or programs.
Okay, Councilmember Najarian, I think you had something to say on this item.
Thank you. I'm gonna amend my comments and adopt some of Mr. Brotman's thoughts, if I may. I do think we should increase the pavement condition improvement fund. I think that number doesn't even stop us from bleeding. I mean, continued at this amount, we're going to have a huge, if you remember that graph that Yazdan showed us, if we continue to put off the funding and the repairs, the ultimate destruction of the roadways are going to accrue. But I'd like to say that the thought of prioritizing the worst roads that have the best opportunities for active transportation to be targeted first. So the worst roads, but the best that have perhaps availability of bike lanes or pedestrian improvements on their, on their course to be prioritized. And I mean, I'd like to see several more million in that fund if possible. I think it's a good use of our money. It prevents further degradation and improves the quality of life of bicycling and pedestrian and safety issues.
Yeah, and thank you. Are you finished, Councilmember Najarian? Good. I just want to add that I agree with you, because I think what we have to aim for is more connectivity in our bike lanes. And so I think that adding more to this funding would be advisable. Any other comments from my fellow colleagues?
I have no objections to the overall funding. In terms of increasing the pavement condition improvement fund, I don't believe anything that we add to it is going to be satisfactory given the conditions overall, and the rate at which these roads are being used and degraded is going to be enough. Ultimately, I would like us to consider proposing a bond measure to the public to look into how we can do larger scale improvements that will sustain our roads and our transportation arteries, which are essential for our economic health, our community health, and include in it the types of improvements that we've had discussions about, such as designated biking lanes. But if we're going to increase it, I don't know what the exact amount is that Councilmember Najarian or my colleagues have in mind. Whatever it is, it's going to be like a drop in the bucket as to what is necessary. Even if we were to double this amount, and there's certainly a lot of competing needs that our community has currently, it's not going to sustain it, and we're still going to have to look at a larger allocation and expenditure. This is something that has been apparently deferred for a number of years, or maybe the costs have increased. Whatever the cause is, we are now looking at a massive deficit in our ability to maintain our roads appropriately and adequately. In terms of bike lane striping, again, I'm not going to object to any of the expenditures here. I've never been a great supporter or fan of painted bike lanes. I don't think that they're adequate. I think that bicyclists, especially in our city, need clear separation from nearby traffic in order to feel safe and to encourage more people to bike around the city. But at this time, I think this is adequate, and I will support these expenditures or allocations.
Is Mr. Emrani still here? I have a question.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Yes, if we're talking about increasing this pavement condition improvement funding, what amount would be, is there an amount that would be impactful, or are we just kind of spinning our wheels here?
Madam Mayor, the study that we did identified about $92 million to bring our pavement condition index up to an acceptable level for all of our streets. So that's the total amount that we identified as part of our study. The $9.2 million that we are recommending here combined from Measure S and our other sources is to maintain our PCI at the level that it is right now, current PCI of 72. That's a combination of different rehab methods to stretch basically our dollars, get the biggest bang for the buck, so to speak. However, the more deteriorated a street is, the more expensive the repair that we may not be able to accomplish as part of this, but we would focus on other streets that, again, we can bring up to speed with that amount that's been allocated.
Madam Mayor, I would add that the pavement condition index of 72, as you may recall in Mr. Amrani's presentation, is well above the state average. So relatively speaking, our streets and roadways are in better condition than our neighboring cities. That doesn't mean, and I'm not advocating that we leave it at that, but obviously it takes more funds to bring that up. I was going to suggest, if it's council's desire to add funds to this line item, we change the title to capital improvement projects that will include specific bikeway facilities as well as pedestrian safety measures for pedestrians as as Mr. Amrani's team put these projects together. So not just for improving the pavement condition, but as well as adding those elements that council has talked about.
Okay, so Councilmember Najarian, after hearing all of that, do you have a recommendation or a suggestion as to a?
Well, yeah, I'd like a number from staff as to what we can realistically have done this year. I know there's a limit to the amount of work that can be done. I don't want to overfund this, but I'd like to get cracking on that deficit, bit by bit if we can.
Madam Mayor, Member City Council, Councilmember Najarian, as I mentioned earlier, another way of handling this is to leave a fund balance in the Measure S fund. So when Public Works comes up with these projects, we bring it forward to council for consideration. We will ask council to appropriate the necessary funds out of that balance, if you prefer. Since we don't have those numbers available right now.
So just put a marker down, basically, for that work. Well, I mean, I would only be throwing the number out, Madam Mayor. I don't want to do that. Maybe maybe my colleagues have an idea.
Okay, well, perhaps we should just leave it at 4.5 and address the issues as they come up and the funding.
Mayor Devine?
Yes, Councilmember Brotman.
If I might, so on that, I agree with the direction. I could go either way. We could add a line item for pedestrian and bike plan implementation, knowing that many of the projects are going to cross between that and pavement condition improvement. And we could kind of draw out of both buckets, or we could put them together in one line item. And as the city managers mentioned, I forget what you called it, but it could be capital improvement projects.
Right.
But I do think it would be good to make it clear what this includes so that, the public, we all know that we are funding, or at least beginning to fund these plans that we're passing. I mean, we passed the pedestrian plan and we should show that we're starting to fund that. And the bicycle transportation plan, we're going to want to start funding that as well. So I would say, rather than just leave it as an unstated, unallocated amount that we can program later, I think we should at least earmark it towards both the pavement conditions and implementing those plans. Let's, I mean, if staff can suggest a number, I don't know. I mean, maybe we could if the pedestrian plan, I mean, what would it take annually to implement the pedestrian plan? What kind of dollars would we need? I think Mr. Bartrosov, when he called in, had some numbers there for the total plan costing 27 million. I don't know over how many years that is, but maybe staff can give us a number. Maybe it's 1 million, maybe it's 2 million. We can add it as a placeholder to show that we are committed to implementing these plans. And that would be my recommendation on that. I have another comment, but maybe we can just kind of try to settle that first.
Yeah, Madam Mayor,
Mr.
members.
Galanian, do you have a?
Yeah,
ahead.
unfortunately, Madam Mayor, I don't have a number, staff doesn't have a number. It all predicated upon what kind of projects and the timing, what we can get done in the next fiscal year. Would be more than happy to put that plan together. So council has an understanding of what can be done where and within what time frame. But if council's desire to set aside or earmark certain funding for it, we can always utilize that as well.
Let me ask this, Mr. Galanian, if you can give us that or have that information for us by the end of the budget hearings, if then we can allocate or change the allocation here.
Yes, we can do that, Madam Mayor.
Okay. And if I could continue.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm getting a text here that's saying the PED plan is 27 million over 5 years. So we need to think about, what is that each year? I mean, that's like 5 million, more than 5 million a year if we're serious about implementing it. So, but the other thing I was going to say here is we've got nothing here for urban forest reforesting and the general question of, heat island, how are we going to address our heating, our hotter climate and the health risks that we're going to face, especially in our denser areas from hotter temperatures. So I would like to see us set aside a significant amount to deal with trees and what I guess are called reflective surfaces, cool roofs and cool street surfacing. I believe that Mr. Imrani is going to be coming back to us with a report on this. So perhaps in the same vein as the pedestrian plan and the bike plan, we can get some indication from staff on what we could potentially do if we had, if we had all the money in the world, what could we realistically accomplish in a year's time when it comes to reflective surfaces and our urban reforesting. But I would strongly suggest that we set aside a significant amount to work on that and not delay any further, especially in South Glendale. And it's so closely tied to walking and our pedestrian plan, because when it's too hot and there isn't good tree cover, people aren't going to go out and walk.
Madam Mayor, members, City Council, if I may, Councilmember Brotman, that particular item, actually, we do have a number for. Currently, with our in-house crews, we plant 300 trees annually. We have the capacity to plant 200 more, so I'll bring the total up to 500 trees, around approximately $80,000 a year. And this would be with our own in-house crews. As far as, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, and I have a question on that, on the 200 trees. Are any of those planted in the walkways or on on Brand or Central where people are walking, or do you put them in our parks and?
No, Madam Mayor, all of these proposed plantings will take place in parkways, not in our parks.
In parkways.
Right.
Okay. Well, $80,000 doesn't seem like it seems doable in this funding. And what about the reflective surfaces?
Yeah, reflective surfaces is a little more challenging. There are not that many of these types of pavement treatments commercially available, but we can definitely do some more research and bring that item back for your consideration with some dollar amounts attached to it.
Madam Mayor, I think,
That would be,
And if I,
Madam Mayor,
Councilmember Brotman.
thank you.
Then we'll take Kasakian, so Brotman, go ahead.
yeah, I would just want to add to that, you know, bioswales. I mean, just this whole category of treatments, bioswales, and also Mr. Kasakian the other day brought up bus awnings, you know, protecting people who are waiting for the bus. So, you know, we have a whole slew of things that we could put under the umbrella of addressing the urban heat island effect, and I can't imagine that 80,000 is all we can reasonably accomplish in a year, you know, or is enough money for everything we can reasonably accomplish in a year, and maybe we have to bring people in from outside to help accelerate some of these projects.
Yeah, and Madam Mayor, Member City Council, Councilmember Brotman, I qualified my statement by saying that these the resources that we currently have, as far as our own in-house crews, their capacity is to plant 200 more trees annually than they do now. An alternative would be to outsource this work, this additional work, and then we'll have to set funds aside for essentially watering these young trees and pruning them as necessary. So we can have a category, if you prefer, for mitigating heat island effect, and it could include these three items that you have already discussed.
I would, you know, like to see that if my colleagues support it. And I just have one final item under infrastructure, if I might, and that's on recycling. I know we have an item this evening, and we're gonna need to do more outreach, community outreach, and education on what goes into the recycling bin now that we're going to be most likely paying for our recycling rather than getting paid. I mentioned earlier, Burbank has developed a very good website, which I think is called, you know, Where Do I Throw It, or something like that. And they're willing to share that intellectual property with us. So I think it wouldn't cost a lot, but I would like to see us develop a good website for recycling and education, some outreach to help our residents and our businesses understand what does and doesn't go into that recycling bin.
Mr. Galanian?
Yeah, again, Madam Mayor, Mayor City Council, it's all depends on your direction. We can certainly come up with an estimate of what it would take for enhanced. We already do recycling outreach and education, but perhaps an enhanced version that's going to take more effort, and we have to contract this out as well.
Okay, so then again, can we look for an amount at the end of the budget hearings, sessions, so that we know kind of how much to allocate to get started on some of these? Or, you know, I haven't heard from other colleagues, Mr. Agajanian, what about just calling these the capital improvements and what was the other one? The urban...
Urban heat island?
The heat island, yeah, the
Right.
heat island effect.
So the suggestion was capital improvements to mitigate, Audrina, capital improvements to mitigate heat island effect.
Madam Mayor, I believe Mr. Agajanian had to leave, so he is not with us for the remainder of this meeting.
Thank you.
Yes, he's left the chamber. Madam Mayor, yes, we can definitely bring the cost estimates for these items back on May 18th. That's where Ms. Flynn and her staff will do all the follow-ups that council's requested over the next several study sessions.
Great, great. So we're probably looking at about 2 million or so. Would you just kind of make a rough estimate?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that figure.
A few million.
Would 2 million? Would that kind of be a ballpark figure to just to kind of get us started?
Yeah,
I mean, we're not going
absolutely.
to be able to do all of these.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, that sounds about right.
Madam Mayor, Mayor Devine, what I want to address earlier is, it's not that I object to any of these. In fact, at various times I've raised the issue regarding our a report for our urban forestry standards and where we are right now, as well as using new materials that can reduce the heat effect. There is a company out there, ePave, with which the city had done a pilot program. I've asked the status of that. And you know, we can address these, but to just the Measure S funds are a very select, specific amount, and you know, to just say that we're going to use it for this or that, I would like to see reports back from staff to see what these expenditures would cost. You know, how much we'll be able to tackle with what amount we have, rather than just putting it up there and trying to cram everything into this particular cycle. Yeah, 2 million may be an accurate figure, maybe too much, maybe less, but I would like to know more specific in terms of amounts, what we're trying to achieve, what the goals are. And look, with trees, there's a lot of things that I can suggest. I would like to see when we put trees in the parkway, I've seen trees placed in a parkway and then they're not cared for and they die because part of the responsibility is to the business owner or the resident who's there, whereas other cities will put in a pipe down to a certain feet and they'll have city crews go and actually water the tree specifically for it to grow healthier, to grow faster, and for its roots not to start invading the water pipes that the city has laid, causing further damage. I mean, there's a number of things we can have discussions about. I just don't know if now is necessarily the time. If it is, I'm more than happy to have these discussions, but I was waiting for us to have these discussions when there was a report back on the urban forestry situation in the city, as well as when we start talking and doing a deeper dive into the conditions of our roads and how we're looking to maintain them. Because if we do improve them, they ought to be done right. They ought to be done with taking into consideration, I think, an overall approach of sustainability and environmental responsibility. But I don't know if I feel comfortable just throwing out figures right now.
Right. Well, I think what the idea here is for the pedestrian lane implementation plan and capital improvements, et cetera, staff will bring back a report and give us a breakdown. But all of these, and correct me, Mr. Galanian, if I'm wrong, all of the programs, the projects that we're talking about included in these funds will come to council, and we will have final approval or not on these projects. Am I correct?
Oh, yes, Madam Mayor,
I
Member
mean,
City.
we're not just giving carte blanche. Here's 4.5 million and just do with it what you want. These projects are going to come back to us.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Member City Council, that is correct. Every project that departments put out for bid comes before council for authorization to move forward. And during that meeting and presentation, we provide the scope of services for your consideration and whether you agree with our recommendations based on your priorities, or you always have the option of modifying the scope of work before we go out to bid. And once we select the contractors, we again bring it back to council and recommend award of the contract to that selected contractor, and you have the option then again to add or provide input. But all of the project, these are programs, you can set aside funds for it. When staff brings back the recommendation with more detail, a fine-tuned cost, then you can move forward with authorizing the city to to implement these programs and projects.
Right, and it doesn't necessarily mean that every single one of them is going, or on the reflective surfaces and the recycling, doesn't mean that all of those are going to come back in the fiscal year. It's just that we have appropriated funding for it, and if staff finds that the I guess the time and appropriateness of that program, then we have the allocation there at the ready.
That is correct, Madam Mayor, and staff will make every effort to implement at least a portion of these programs, acknowledging it's important to City Council.
Okay, all right, then let's just wait for that report to come back to us at the end of the budget sessions, and we'll look at an allocation for the funding.
If I may, Mayor Devine, just for clarification, we are adding 4 projects here to be determined for funding by May 20th, or is it just 2, the first 2? I'm not clear on the reflective surfaces and the enhanced recycling.
Ms. Flynn, ordinary reflective services would be part of the capital improvements to mitigate heat island effect.
And then the recycling one?
Recycling efforts are standalone item.
So that would remain there. Okay, so we would have 3 that are to be determined by May 20th. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's go on to the next, which is, I think, Park.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, members of council, the next category grouping is Parks and Recreation. The total there is $2.9 million in projects.
Thank you. And I just want to add before we start a discussion on this one that the issue of I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank right now. The grass and the
artificial turf?
Artificial turf is not part of this discussion. This project, everything will come back to council. All we're doing here today is allotting them funding to move ahead with the project. When it comes time to approve or disapprove of the project, then we'll be able to discuss the artificial turf. So let's not get into that conversation. If you don't mind, let's just focus on the funding.
Madam Mayor, if I may
Yes.
make a clarification, the Fremont Park renovation project was approved by previous city council in 2019, I believe. That included installation of artificial turf. The item that traditionally would have come back to council, because we already out to bid for this project as approved by previous council, it will have come back to council to award the contract to the selected contractor. However, as it was mentioned earlier, Mr. Bolinikian and staff took an item to the Parks Commission on, generally speaking, on the installation of artificial turf for our projects, all of our projects, proposed projects citywide. And it will next go to the Sustainability Commission. Staff is working on a life cycle analysis and cost. And once that's gone through the Sustainability Commission, the recommendation will be to bring that item to City Council for consideration.
All right. So therefore, the discussion is not really apropos for today. We'll just look at the allotments and go from there.
One question, Madam Mayor.
Yes,
On
Councilmember.
the aquatics program for ONIC, ONIC, does that amount fully fund your year-round aquatic services and programs?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, yes, it does. The 636,000 is the year-round component. Basically, we call it the off-season, which is September through May. End of May through September, we have a budget that's budget as part of the general fund.
Yeah, it's a great, listen, I want to, there was a speaker that was talking about South Glendale. This is a incredible resource for the residents of South Glendale. And now that we're doing it year round, I've seen firsthand the dedication of the employees and the pool managers and everything from infants learning how to swim to there was a swim meet this weekend with a 98-year-old competitor who's a world champion in that age group, by the way. So I just want to make sure that that continues. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. All righty. If there aren't any other changes here,
Mayor-
let's.
Mayor Devine?
Councilmember Brotman?
Yeah, I'm good with everything that's on here, and I won't talk about the artificial turf now. But the electric operating equipment or electric operated equipment and infrastructure, I think staff said they would need an additional 300,000 to do the remaining parks, and I would ask that we include that. Also, I thought Councilmember Kasakian's comment on Rock Haven made sense, and perhaps we should add to that 25,000 to get a better sense of what the maintenance situation is at Rock Haven. And then the third point I'd like to make is, last year we set aside $1 million for acquiring park space. That was a relatively small amount, but it's building up a kitty, and I would like to see us put more money this year towards that. I think it should be more than $1 million because we know that when something becomes available, it's going to cost us probably tens of millions. But to the extent we can start squirreling away money for that, I think that would be a good thing and a good indication of direction, because I think ultimately that's what this really is. It's us making our Measure S bucket not just first come, first serve, but us kind of stating what our intention is for spending this money broadly. So that would be my suggestion. Those would be my suggestions on Parks and Recreation.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Brotman. I think staff mentioned that they are already assessing Rock Haven, so that's being done, and I don't know that we need to allot any money for that. That was my understanding. Are there any objections to raising the amount for the, if you'll, Audrey, if you'll move this up, thank you. Let's see, where is Parks and Rec? Oh, here it is. The electric operated equipment and infrastructure, anyone object to raising that to?
Madam Mayor, members
Yes.
of the council.
Yeah.
If we were to expand the equipment and purchase it citywide, we would need 305,000 just to purchase the equipment. Infrastructure, upgrading the infrastructure costs, we would need to get back to the council. I would assume you're looking at probably another 150,000 in infrastructure upgrades.
So we're talking about how much more?
For about 450.
No, 550.
550.
550.
In total.
In total.
500.
Yes, 550 in total. And then I know one of the callers had mentioned AQMD rebate. We did contact our AQMD rep, and there is a pause on those rebates. This will allow us to purchase at 550,000 or the 305,000 quote that we got. If we were to receive the AQMD rebate, it'll cost the city 230,000.
Okay, well, that's not bad. That's pretty good. Because of this pilot project, you are convinced that the electric operated equipment is feasible and reliable and does a great job, that you're satisfied with all of that?
Madam Member, members of the council, yes, these are handheld equipment. So the blowers, the hand shears, electric shears, and the edgers, and some smaller lawnmowers, the handheld lawnmowers. We are looking into the larger lawnmowers, but at this point, the largest one they have won't work currently in our facilities. So we are looking at other options. So the battery operated equipment that we are requesting to purchase are the handheld ones, and they are working fine and working well throughout our facilities.
Good. Well, I would have no objection to raising that, especially if we have a rebate coming, which wouldn't bring it to that much. That would leave Councilmember Kasakian and Najarian. Are you opposed, or are you?
Mayor Devine,
for
I am not opposed. In fact, I appreciate the specifics in terms of the figures and what it would take. That is the type of answer that I can get behind and I can support. And I certainly would like to see that equipment expanded to all our parks.
And Councilmember Najarian?
I'm fine with that.
Oh, okay, so we're good with that allotment then, 550 for electric operated equipment. Okay, next.
How about earmarking money for land acquisition?
For what? I'm sorry?
For acquiring new land
Parkland.
for additional parks in South Glendale? You know how last year we put $1 million aside? Yeah.
Yes. No, I assumed that we were going to do that, definitely. Add another million, at least $1 million to that.
That was my assumption as well, Mayor.
Yes. Okay,
We'll add
moving
that
on.
in.
Okay, moving on.
Moving on to other quality of life programs, the total presented is almost $5.1 million.
Okay, my question is for Chief Povolitis, if I might. Have you given any thought to electric vehicles for the police department?
Madam Mayor, members, City Council, if I may, yes, they have, and that's going to be part of, and it has been part of our fleet fund's efforts to gradually electrify our fleet, including some vehicles for the police department.
Okay, so with that being said, are there any comments on this?
Madam Mayor, just one thing.
Go ahead.
Mayor Devine. Yeah, on the mental health resources, so I'm really glad we're thinking about getting another person from the county. And my question is, and I asked this to the chief earlier, is can we, or do you feel we should, and can we do more to train our patrol officers? Because, you know, when I went out and I did a ride along, I met Daniel Lee, who's our mental health expert, and he's our side of the HOPE team. And I asked him, you know, how many Daniel Lees are there on the police force? And basically he said, it's me. You know, he said other people are getting training, but it's kind of, it's a class here or a class there. It's not as comprehensive as it could be. And I know there was some suggestion of having Daniel himself do training for other staff members, but then that takes him out of the field. So I don't know if it's money for overtime for him, or if we bring other resources in to do that training. But, you know, expanding that HOPE team is great, but I think we also want to provide more mental health training for our patrol officers generally.
Mr. Galanian or Chief Povolitis, are there any plans for doing that at this point?
Mayor Devine, members of council, Councilmember Brotman, we train all of our police officers at a basic level for mental health training. The idea of having the mental health evaluation team out there is to have someone with a much higher level of training to deal with some of the more complex things. But we also have other officers interspersed throughout the department. Part of our crisis negotiation team, they are all extremely highly trained to deal with these. So we are looking at expanding that and bringing that process forward as we do that. And we're also looking at other alternatives as the county looks at how it's going to respond to mental health emergencies. So there's a lot of moving pieces in this as well.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Okay then.
Well, there's a sustainability office
Right.
personnel that I don't think we were.
Well, before we move on to 32, can we talk a bit about, I have a question about the Central Library Children's and Teen Room renovation, and it's just a point of clarification.
Then we
Dr.
have
Schaefer.
two issues that, okay, Mayor, let's see, Councilmember Kasakian go ahead on the library, and then we'll get to Councilmember Najarian on the sustainability.
Thank you. On the issue of the Central Library Children's Teen Room renovation, the term was used, it was value engineered out of the project. Is that correct? For those lay people that are watching this and may not understand what value engineered means, can you please explain what you meant by that?
Certainly, Madam Mayor, council members, Councilmember Kasakian. That is my understanding. It was before my time. Value engineering typically means the project cost is desired to come down, sometimes for lack of funding, other reasons. And so my understanding was that a choice was made to not make improvements in that area, save for a shear wall, which for earthquake safety purposes was an important thing to put into the project.
Okay. My understanding was that there was no plans to improve it in the original. That decision that you're talking about, value engineering, may have happened before the discussion came to council, but I believe when it came to council, there were no planned improvements in that renovation plan that was proposed at the library.
I would have to defer to the city manager on that.
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, Councilmember Kasakian, you both are correct. The item was value engineered out of the concept plan to bring the cost of the renovations within the appropriated budget. And that portion of the work that was value engineered out didn't make it to the plans, so it wasn't part of the plans. You're right.
I would just like to say that if anything is going to be value engineered out of any proposed programs in the city or improvements, children, teens, those should not be at the top of the list of things to eliminate. I understand, and I've mentioned this a number of times. I'll probably mention it a few more times as we approach the completion of this project, because I do think it was a major misstep by staff, by the city, by its leadership as a whole, to ignore and omit this portion of a very, very important asset that we have for our community and for our young residents. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Kasakian. All right, Councilmember Najarian.
No, it's just the discussions that we held on the sustainability office. It's not that, I'm not saying David Jones doesn't need one, but first and foremost was that we were not going to pay any pensions or benefits out of Measure S. So, I mean, I don't want to go through it again. I'm not putting sustainability on the back end, but
Right,
it's the principle.
And that's kind of what my argument was. If the funding was for a program or something like that, we would have no problem. My question to Mr. Galanian is, isn't it possible for us to do a staff reassignment, to give him an assistant, kind of an across the board, online, inline, so that there's no real hiring?
Yes, Madam
Move
Mayor.
someone from another department to
Madam Mayor,
help
members
him
of City Council, I will look again and I will have conversations with the department heads. However, as you know, because of the staffing cuts that we have endured over the years, we are at bare minimum with staff that are currently doing the work that they're assigned to. However, we can potentially take and that was the plan, to take a vacant position in another department and utilize that to hire an assistant for the sustainability officer. However, the cost, if not approved here, then will have to be borne by the general fund. So we're not adding a head count to our number of staff, but we'll take a vacant position and reassign it to the Office of Sustainability.
Okay, well, I'd rather see us do it that way than to use the Measure S funding for this particular item. So
Understood.
I'm in agreement with Council Member Najarian, and let's just take that out of the general fund and use it that way, and not use it for the from our Measure S funding.
May I make a quick comment on that? Yeah, so as long as we get that person under David, that's fine. I don't care where it comes from. But just as a point of clarification, don't we fund staff PERSable staff under the rental rights program out of Measure S?
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, that is accurate, especially with the rental assistance program. And what the department has proposed, we are going to need 2 additional staff members.
So isn't, we're being inconsistent here.
I changed my vote then. I don't want any salaried staff with pensions and benefits to be paid out of Measure S. That was something we made clear. We made it absolutely clear before we went through our list of categories that we're going to fund. We said we're not going to pay pensions and benefits out of Measure S. The only exception I'm willing to make, if it's a public safety, if it's a life safety critical hire, but I'm assuming that our crossing guards are contracted. I'm assuming that our lifeguards at the pool are contracted. But you are right, Mr. Brotman. You are right. I changed my vote on anything that involves a permanent FTE to the city, full-time employee.
Well, then I guess we're going to have to rejigger things because we've been doing that. We did that last year. We had that rental rights program going this current fiscal year.
Well, I didn't realize they were full-time employees. I thought we were contracting out for that stuff, but.
Well, and I thought they were just staff members that were doing this job and not really, extra hires. So, where does that leave us, Mr. Galanian?
The proposed, Madam Mayor, member of City Council, the proposed fiscal year 21-22 line now you're moving too fast, Audrey. Can you move up? Rental rights program for $470,000 was the cost of hiring 2 new FTEs and 1 part-time hourly FTE, part-time hourly person.
So when we say hiring, does that mean they will be hired anew, or is it a similar elimination of other vacancies and appropriating them or assigning them to this task?
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, Councilmember Kasakian, when we established the program in 2019, we filled it with existing staff and that moved from housing positions and restricted housing funds to the rental rights program. That's when we rolled out the right to lease and the relocation program. So they have been funded through here for the last 2 years, but they were existing staff that.
So it's not the addition of 2 new.
No, sir.
It's simply, so in funding it through this, how's it coming out of this versus where the funding was coming from before? I mean, they were paid before through the general fund, were they not?
I don't think they were paid through the general fund. I'd have to go back and look. I think they were paid through housing funds that are restricted, that couldn't be used for the rental rights program.
In terms of my philosophical approach to this, I do agree that we shouldn't add any large cost staff. But if we have, for instance, if we have hourly staff that are already doing a task that we feel is necessary for the providing of services to the city, and those individuals are working a requisite number of hours, that makes them virtually or actually full-time employees, yet we're not going to make them full-time employees, then simply because we're trying to save on a PERS obligation or some type of benefits is almost exploitation of that individual. I don't know. I don't want to go there, but if we have individuals doing work currently, which it sounds like we do in a specific area, and we're going to pay them fairly for providing services, and we ought to. I would support that. On the other hand, if we're bringing in new hires, someone completely outside, not an internal allocation or whatever it may be that shuffles the funds around, we have to be smart. We have to be creative. Just as on the sustainability, I support providing an assistance staff person to our sustainability individual, but I don't want to see someone being a completely new hire at this time when we've been telling everyone we have a hiring freeze. but reallocating individuals, reclassifying individuals, so their pay and their compensation reflects the work that they're doing, I am fine with.
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, just want to be clear on this. Like I mentioned, we will definitely look again, but my recommendation was to reallocate an existing vacant position to fill this position in the Office of Sustainability and not add to our headcount. But it's going to be extremely difficult to find someone from another department and reclassify that position. That will leave a gap in that department, and that has to be picked up by other staff members.
Madam Mayor, if I may, just to clarify so that council understands completely here. With regards to salaried or even hourly positions, there are several programs that have current staffing in them. Let me just let you know what those are. The Rental Rights Program has combination of full-time as well as hourly staff. The Housing Rental Subsidy Program has a combination of full-time as well as hourly. The Aquatics Program, year-round aquatics, same thing, full-time as well as hourly. And as you know, the Sustainability Office is one position proposed, and then there is an hourly assigned for the Rockhaven maintenance. And just also with regards to PERS benefits, when an hourly is hired, if that hourly position is presumed to be for a longer term, and we anticipate that they will be on board and meet the requirements of PERS, we enroll them in PERS as soon as they are hired. That is a requirement of PERS. If it's more of a seasonal staff, then they are not immediately enrolled in PERS. But once they do reach, I believe it's 1,000 hours is the minimum, then they are enrolled in PERS. So eventually, if we have longer-term hourlies that maybe we didn't anticipate being on board for a longer period of time, they will eventually be in PERS, or the opposite. If we know that the hourly will be working for a longer duration, it's generally the rule of thumb is if you know they're going to be on board longer than 6 months, then you enroll them in PERS from the get-go. That is full compliance with PERS.
So there will be PERSable positions regardless of how
Absolutely.
the hiring is done. So
Yes.
there's an impact regardless.
Yes, and the costs that you see are fully loaded. They include any benefit load for those individuals or those positions, yes.
I'm sorry, Ms. Flynn, did you mention the annual community events also? That involves staff too?
I did not. I don't have that broken out.
Okay, so the bottom line here is the fact that we have been and we are paying salaries to our staff out of Measure S funding, including their PERSable.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah,
If it is
so-
council's desire to do it differently, then we would have to bring back numbers for each of those programs that would be a reduced cost for Measure S, but an increased cost in the fund. Most likely, these would all be general fund obligations then.
Right.
I think we need to do that.
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, we can certainly look into that. Just want to, I probably don't need to remind you, but as you saw during budget study session number 1, we're also facing a significant deficit in the general fund. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, how about if you bring back the, what it would look like if we change the procedure, and we can take a look at that?
Yes, we
And make a
can,
decision.
staff will work on that for the May 18th meeting, study session.
Okay.
On this item, just in general, with the allocation of funds and providing an assistant to the sustainability officer, in concept, I have, again, no objection to it, Mayor and my colleagues, because I do think that when we implemented this, or we came up with the idea of creating this, it was that the office would work in coordination with all departments to make sure that they are fostering a culture of sustainability and having their operations reflect the values that we're putting in place. And I know how hard that can be with limited staffing, especially if you're just one person and you're trying to interface with the public and the great demands of some of the members of the public who have their ideas and their input, as we have heard today, and trying to work across departments and communicating with staff and trying to change patterns of behavior. Therefore, I do think that there is value in this. On the quality of life issue, I would like to ask staff for 2 items to either be included in this list or to be considered if my colleagues would support that. The first is, we have seen an increase in graffiti. We do not have the adequate staffing as we once did to do graffiti removal and remediation and address it. So that is something that I think is important for the city to bring back. And in addition to that, I'm going to bring up bulky items, Mr. Galanian and Mr. Amrani. I do think that despite our best efforts, we're still playing catch up a lot of times, and we're not addressing this issue as best we can, even with the hires that have been done with companies to handle this. We need to address this issue in some sort of different fashion. And if it means allocating more resources to it, I would like to see it done, because I would rather spend more money than drive through the city and see some streets that look like the world's worst yard sale, with all sorts of items just left on the wayside for days. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, Councilmember Kasakian, we can certainly bring a short report back on the same day on the graffiti removal. On the bulky item pickup, Mr. Imrani will also update you on what it takes to enhance that program. But our refuse fund is what is intended to pay for stuff like that, so you can allocate funding from the refuse fund, not necessarily Measure S.
Great. Okay. All right. So we'll look forward to that report on the graffiti removal. And if that completes the
That completes all the items that staff had recommended, yes.
And if we could just, since we do have just a few more minutes for our meeting this morning, I'd like to just kind of go back up to the top of the spreadsheet, just so everyone is clear what we've approved and what's coming back for discussion on May 20th. So under housing, it looks like all items are approved, but we will be coming back with some sort of a breakdown for the rental subsidy program and the rental rights programs with regards to staffing. But for now, those dollars are there. Under infrastructure, what has been proposed is approved, and to be determined on May 20th would be potential funding for the pedestrian and bike plan implementation, capital improvements to mitigate the heat island effect, as well as enhanced recycling, those 3 projects.
Just to clarify, that would be recycling education or a website, not recycling itself.
Yes, recycling education.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Under Parks and Recreation, the year-round aquatics program, we will have a breakdown with staffing, the approvals for annual community events, and if there's any staffing there as well. Glorietta Park concession building renovation is approved, as well. Fremont Park is approved. The electric-operated equipment and infrastructure has been increased from $100,000 to $550,000. Rockhaven maintenance is $25,000, but potentially with some staff in there that will provide the breakout. And then we're adding an additional $1 million for land acquisition for parks. Under other quality, I'm sorry.
No, I just thought of something, but I'll wait till you're done.
Okay. Under other quality of life, $200,000 for mental health resources, and the police vehicles and fire vehicles are all approved, as well as the crossing guard program. And yes, that is a contract. I know that there was a question on that. That one is a contract. The central library renovation for the teens and children's room, 2.5 is approved. The 81 is not for the sustainability office personnel. And then we're adding graffiti removal and remediation, and then I think bulky item would come off of this based on the increase to the refuse fund if we do increase that program. Did we capture everything correctly?
Councilman, I think Councilmember Brotman wanted to add something.
Yeah, I have one thing in my notes here that I totally forgot about, and that's our climate action plan. We know we're going to need to be producing one, and we haven't set aside anything, and I think Measure S would be an appropriate place, wouldn't it, to fund that?
Mr. Galanian?
Madam Mayor and City Council, I believe Councilmember Brotman's question was directed at his colleagues. I do have an estimate of 300.
Oh, no, you don't. Not that easy, Mr. Galanian. That's for you, Charlie.
We talked about this, and I thought you were, Mr. Galanian, you were going to
yes, I was
propose a cost, or you even told me what you thought it would cost.
Right. I was just getting to that. So based on what we have included in the task for to put together the climate action plan, to hire a consultant at an approximate cost of $320,000, that would include community education and engagement, analyzing the GHG emissions and recommending emission targets, obviously strategy on selection and carbon neutrality pathways, develop short, long-term funding and implementation plan, develop tools for monitoring and tracking, and final plan and environmental documentation not to exceed $320,000.
And that's a consultant, you say?
That would be, yes, sir, a hired consultant, an expert from the outside.
And then that comes to council with proposed policy initiatives. Is that what
yes, eventually, Madam Mayor, Member City Council, it will go through the Sustainability Commission for their consideration and input and recommendation to council.
Okay. So how do we have Councilmember Kasakian, Najarian? Are you in favor of this $320,000 allocation?
And what would the timeline be for that? Could that be all expended in this fiscal year, or is it something that's going to carry over a couple of years? Because I don't know how long it takes to do that.
Madam Mayor, Member City Council, Councilmember Najarian, the issuance of the RFP and hiring of the consultant should not take more than 4 to 6 months. Now, depending on how the outreach, especially the community outreach element of that plan will move forward and how long it'll take, the cost of the hiring of the consultant and the work they do more than likely will be expended during one fiscal year, but the program and the plan will have to come back the following fiscal year.
I'm fine with the allocation.
If I can just add, I think it's something that's very important. I'm hopefully going to be involved. That it will be up to the Sustainability Commission. We'll be involved in the global climate action.
I want a recalculation. I want a recalculation from Mr. Brotman on our percentage of We were at 0.06% or something. Throw this in and later, at a later time, give me our sustainability percentage.
I'll do that. When we get our TBD numbers filled in.
Yeah, I think we have to do this, right? I think we voted on this.
Yes.
Now's the time to do it. So I think we have to,
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think we have to do it.
Yeah, and I think this is what we're talking about when we say instead of funding positions, we should be funding programs or plans, and this is a perfect example. So I'm in favor of adding 320
So,
to that
yeah,
action plan.
throw it in there.
Okay. Audrey, could you double check the formula on line 36, please? Make sure that that's totaling. Okay, great. All right, so as of right now, appropriations are a little bit higher, from 24.6 to 26 point almost 3 million. But we do have some follow-up items for council. And then you can see at the bottom there what that does with the projected ending fund balance.
Okay.
And can I ask a question?
Mr. Brotman?
That 7 million at the end there, that does not include the, something like 6 million roughly that potentially could be reallocated
Correct.
back to ARPA, right?
Correct. It does not.
So that's a good ending fund balance, I think, so that we can work with the other to be determined. I also wanted to ask about I had suggested the pilot project for the street art, and that would go in the infrastructure. Does anyone have an objection to that?
No, I love that idea.
Maybe do the Adams crosswalk and see if that helps in their situation.
Is that staffing or is that not?
Madam Mayor, members of City
be,
Council. Yeah, obviously
Yes.
it depends on the art itself. I can't see our own in-house crews, and I don't mean that in a negative way, being able to implement a street art project, but we can always hire a contractor to do that.
Yeah, and I think in our previous, Mr. Galanian, in our previous council meetings, when we spoke about the street art, Mr. Calvert suggested it would be around $100,000 or $125,000 to do a crosswalk. So maybe if we allocate $100,000 to this, and this would be a good project also for arts and culture to perhaps get involved with.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Any objections to that?
Madam Mayor, or Mayor Devine, I would like to just see that whatever money is allocated, we first make an effort to try and draw from the talent that exists in this city among the many artists that we have working in the industry
Yes.
or creating, versus just trying to go out and directly hire someone at a certain amount. I'm sure there's a lot of people who would love to see their skills and their talents displayed for all to enjoy.
Absolutely. Good suggestion. Okay, so that brings us to the end, does it, Ms. Flynn?
Yes, Madam Mayor, it does.
Okay, so we'll look forward to, thank you to you and to staff and Audrey and the, everyone for working so hard on this. I know it's not an easy task. With that in mind, what's the next item, please?
Adjournment.
Adjournment?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned at 12:05. Thank you all. See you at 3. See you at 3.